that even for a minute, we have a quorum, if for no other reason than we can approve all the minutes so they don't keep appearing on the agenda with longer and longer series of minutes. But what I want to do, because Chief Dan Baldwin, Fire Chief Dan Baldwin is here, but can only be here for, I think he told me, the first 15 minutes or so, and I'll explain why he's here. And Mark Rasmussen said he could be here the first half hour. And in the agenda, if you look, besides approval of the minutes, we have a climate resilience report update, which unfortunately, Jeff Canton has put yeoman's work on, and we distributed it with the agenda and the minutes. And you'll see it's quite different than the last time we looked at it, but Jeff can't be here this meeting. And so I'd like people to take a look at it. Mark Rasmussen is now with us. Mark has said that at the bottom of the agenda, it suggests the next meeting date be May 22nd, and that's the annual meeting of the Buzzards Bay Coalition. And Mark, as president of the coalition, feels that he needs to be at the annual meeting. I don't know why he feels that, but I don't know where his priorities are. But so perhaps that's also Memorial Day weekend. That Thursday is the beginning kind of Memorial Day weekend. So if we pushed it another Thursday, that would be May 29th. And Mark was saying that he could have, the culmination really of the 3-year study on gooseberry presented to the Climate Resilience Committee at that May meeting. So if we take the last item on the agenda first and have that date be May 29th, Mark, would that date work for you?
It would be great. Thanks, John. Everything you said is great. And I'm sorry to not be able to do the 22nd, but
totally understandable.
Get the gooseberry findings to everybody. Yeah.
Is that date also? I hadn't realized that the 22nd is also Memorial Day weekend. I mean, the beginning of Memorial Day weekend. Is the 29th then okay with folks? All right, we'll make that the 29th.
Wait, can I just say one thing?
Sure, Constance.
Have we always met? Has this committee always met on a Thursday? It seemed to me we used to meet.
No, we've always met on a Thursday at 5 o'clock.
Okay, well, it is my understanding. I think we've got some conflicts going on with Thursdays. I believe so what is going on the 22nd of May? Is that when what is it? Is there a Barrier Beach Committee on the 22nd of May? Something else is going on that's kind of important.
Well, we're not going to be on the 22nd. We'll be on the 29th.
Well, my question is this. It's like, we're also trying to, that once a month is when we also schedule the Offshore Wind Advisory Committee meetings. And we generally do it one of the last 2 Thursdays of May. But there's something else, maybe the 20, I don't know what it was. Okay, well, maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe the 22nd hasn't been taken. The 29th is fine. I just, we're getting some conflict with, there's so many, there's only so many people that are interested in what we do, with the CRC, and which has to do, of course, with the environment and with the beaches and all that. And then now we've got this barrier beach committee, which is great, but it's the same people that are also interested in the offshore wind committee, and everybody seems to be meeting on Thursdays or something. So it's I just want to point that out. And but okay, fine. Yeah.
Well, we've been going for 3 or 4 years on Thursdays. And so if other people are in conflict with us, maybe they can move their meetings.
John, did you note that Kim has a note in there about the WRWA has something on the 29th?
Yeah, it's the Watershed Alliance's speaker series is that night at 5 o'clock. What would it work to move it to Wednesday for that one time?
I also, John, I'm not sure if you know this, and maybe Michael knows this better, but the remote meeting is ending.
It is going, yeah, that's correct. It's going to end at the end of March. I think a lot of folks are anticipating that there will be another extension or at least a last minute change in the open meeting law legislation, but that remains to be seen. So as of now, at the end of March, we cannot meet remotely anymore.
Good.
All right. So is your preference the 28th or is your preference the 21st of May?
Either my preference for the 28th, but I can do either.
You're probably going to be busy on the night before.
Yeah.
It might be.
Let's do the 28th of May. 28th of May. May 28th, Wednesday, 5 o'clock. And it'll be in person, and Michael will figure out where to do it. But it'll be in person, which Constance and someone else, I can't remember, it's in the minutes, had suggested at our last meeting. Okay, has anyone else arrived yet?
And where will it be in person?
I said Michael will figure out a place and we'll let people know. Okay, as the chief said, he had he could only be here a little bit. I wanted to mention that we'd all watched with anguish as fires consumed a lot of Southern California. And I'm sure a lot of you heard or read how people said environmental reasons contributed to those fires, how there was a wet spring and that promoted a lot of growth in the spring, and it was followed by a drought during the summer, which cooked all of that growth, and then lightning and other things set off the fires, and lots of people lost their homes, belongings, savings, you name it. And so wet spring followed by drought sounded an awful lot like our year last year. And so I met with Chief Dan Baldwin and his deputy and said, so could that happen here? And he said, basically, yes. And we have some of the same conditions. And I asked him, I told him about our committee and asked him if he might be interested in putting together in his department a small tiger team about would there be things the town could do? Would there be things that individual property owners could do, whether they are businesses or homeowners, to become more resilient? And he didn't kick me out of his office right away. He thought about it and invited him to come to our meeting. And lo and behold, here he is. Chief, any thoughts, further thoughts on this?
Sure. So thank you for inviting me here this evening. As you stated, my name is Dan Baldwin. I'm the Westport Fire Chief. I've been on the department for close to 30 years. I don't claim to be an expert, but I know what I've seen working on the department and in our area. Obviously, coincidentally, California had their issues, and as you all know, Massachusetts had an unprecedented fire season in the fall with numerous brush fires throughout the state. I will add that some of those fires, many of those fires were the result of an arsonist taking advantage of extremely dry conditions that we hadn't seen in quite a while, conditions that may or may not be a factor of climate change, which is what our committee is here to discuss. In Westport, we've seen some growth as far as neighborhoods go and developments and things like that. So obviously every time a new home is built, there's less forest available to burn. But it also, which can be a good thing, but the bad side of that is it brings the human element into the area, and humans for the most part are one of the biggest contributors, if not the biggest contributor to wildfires, whether it's intentional, discarding smoking material, anything from coals from a fireplace that are not disposed of properly. We had that instance occur several months ago. Somebody doused their coals from their indoor wood stove, placed it out in the yard, winds picked up, and they had a brush fire, almost lost their shed out back. So the risk is there. In our area, the topography is much different than out in California. We don't see sustained winds, 70, 80, 90 miles an hour for days on end like they do out there. We do have gusty winds at times. We don't have hilly terrain, which makes a big difference in wildfires and how you're able to fight them, how they spread. But what we do have around here is a lot of what we refer to as leaf litter and underbrush, briars, etc. All things that, when they're dry, can act as a pretty decent fuel. And then what we traditionally see in our area, living on the ocean, is an afternoon wind that usually picks up, which usually contributes to most often open burning. We're a rural agricultural community, as you all know, and sometimes I say to myself, we see the signs around town that say right to farm, and I think right underneath it should say right to burn, because the number of people that want to burn or that do burn in Westport is pretty substantial. We issue hundreds of permits throughout the open burning season, which runs through January 15th through May 1st, regulated by the DEP and by the state of Massachusetts. We'll shut it down, for example, even though we had a fair amount of rain yesterday, we're going to be shutting down burning tomorrow because we have winds forecast in excess of 50 miles an hour. What happens there, people will start a permitted fire, brush pile, and oftentimes it gets away from them. Over the last 5 years, we had about 30 acres burn. Over the last 20 years, we had about 80 acres burn throughout town. We respond to probably roughly between 1 to 150 outdoor related fires a year. Anything from an unauthorized burn, it can just be a simple small fire that maybe gets away a little out of hand, and then full blown brush fires where we're in the woods dealing with several acres of land being consumed. Traditionally, we see that more towards the end of the burning season. We're pretty lenient with open burning this time of year because, in a sense, we kind of want people to get it out of the way before things do start to dry up, before we see those spring winds kick in. One of the things that we're seeing, which is most likely contributed to the change in our climate, is a lack of snowfall. And a lack of snowfall throughout the winter certainly contributes in our area to the increased risk of brush fires. When you don't have that snowpack covering the leaf litter or the peat, it tends to dry off quickly. And one of the things that we do see is fires, especially during the fall, fires burning deep into the ground. And we had one fire. Residents were admittedly burning several days beforehand. This was during the fall when it was very dry. We had the winds pick up, and the fire actually followed the root line, probably a good maybe 6-8 inches under the ground. And then, the wind fueled it and fanned it, and it sprung up in another part of the property. That's not uncommon in our area, especially the portions of our town, the wooded areas that haven't been touched in hundreds of years. You'll see the fire actually burn underneath into the peat. In terms of what can we do? I mean, you know, open burning, as I said, in a town like Westport, it's necessary in many places. The transfer station does not accept brush. So the residents have which if that's something that, you know, if you were asking me for what can be done on the town side, they may want to look at accepting brush. I'm sure there's an expense behind that. I don't see it as being a moneymaker for the town, like recycling. I believe the town profits a little bit on that. I know that the town of Dartmouth at one time, and I don't know if they still do, they had a very large wood chipper, and they would chip the brush, and I believe they recycled it as mulch. But mulch in itself can be a danger in certain areas. People tend to, you know, discard cigarettes into them, and mulch catches fire very quickly. But as far as giving the residents a place to bring brush, they can bring leaves and whatnot to the transfer station. But last I knew, they do not accept brush. That might be something that your committee might want to look at, and that might reduce the number of permitting that we have to, permittable fires that we have to allow. People may be more inclined to bring their brush to the dump rather than burn it. We also, you know, with increased brush fires and brush fire seasons and whatnot, if, you know, the climate continues to evolve the way it is, obviously smoke inhalation and respiratory problems are of concern. Even the California wildfires, the Canadian wildfires, not this past summer, but I believe the summer before, if everybody remembers, there was a haze over Westport. It was wild, and we were getting calls every day, people reporting, you know, fire in the area, and it was the smoke coming down from Canada. So, you know, I'm not sure what the process would be on the town side or the committee side, but making sure that people have, you know, proper ventilation in their homes, whether it be through air conditioners. You kind of got to be careful if it's intaking air from the outside in, that can create more problems. But maybe opening up, you know, certain cooling centers or things of that nature, providing, you know, the elderly with rides to and from their doctor's appointments to get medications they may need to help with any respiratory ailments that they may have as a result of, you know, increased smoke, et cetera, from wildfires. We did receive an email from the district fire warden. They're expecting a busy season. Again, the lack of snow cover this winter is of concern. There hasn't been a whole lot of rain. We're still sort of recovering from the drought last fall. They do prescribed burns in Fall River and Freetown on a regular basis. In Westport, the last prescribed burn I think that may have occurred in Westport was on Gooseberry, and that's conducted by DCR, not the town. Most of the private wildland in Westport is privately owned, to my knowledge, and so prescribed burns are something that you would normally see in Westport. As far as what people can do to kind of protect their homes, mulch again is a real concern, especially with vinyl siding. Oftentimes you'll see the vinyl siding go all the way down to the ground levels. People want to, you know, make it aesthetically pleasing, and they trying to hide the foundation or the cement work on the house. Then you'll see the mulch butted right up against it. You know, things like spontaneous combustion. But for me, I'm always more concerned about discarded cigarettes and smoking material getting into the mulch, again, up against vinyl. Vinyl is essentially a fuel. Once it gets going, it's going to rapidly accelerate a house fire. You know, the fire department could assist the climate committee in terms of public announcements. We have a pretty active social media page. Things as simple as not parking a vehicle on leaves or tall grass. A lot of times people don't realize they park in a field or what have you, and you know, the catalytic converter and the exhaust is extremely hot, and that absolutely will create a fire, which then can spread into our wooded areas around town. And we have a new brush truck on order. That actually will be extremely helpful in combating fires that we do come across in our town, and allowing us to mitigate them more quickly and efficiently. We do have a member of our department that works for DCR on the forest team. He's actually been out west on more than one occasion to battle wildfires out there. He's certainly a resource. One of the things that we saw in the last couple of years with DCR is actually coming to our town. They're self-dispatching in some ways. They hear us on the radios, and they're dispatching out, which has been extremely helpful. They bring a lot of knowledge. They bring the right equipment, tools. added manpower, which we desperately need. So that's always a big help. Another thing that we're absolutely seeing, and again, being on the department for such a long time, something I haven't seen, but the gypsy moth infestation, maybe going back 10 years ago now, has led to numerous dead and decaying trees throughout town. And so one of the more interesting things that we're seeing over the last couple of years is that we're having fires actually burning up, high up into the trees. Sort of what you would see, or normally see on TV when you're seeing these fires out west. Again, normally most of our fires are ground level, fast moving. We don't usually see them up into the trees the way we're seeing them over the last couple of years. Maybe 3 years ago, we had a brush fire in Drift Road. We had a call on the Bristol County tree team. They're experts at falling trees. Trees were actually coming down around our members. We had to remove them from the area. Highway Department was dispatched last spring, I believe, to assist us with their bucket truck in cutting down some of these trees. We have to make sure, obviously, the fire is fully extinguished before we clear the scene. We can't just allow them to burn up into the trees. But it's something that I personally don't recall seeing. I'm sure things are, happen in cycles, and maybe once upon a time that did happen, but absolutely seeing what I believe is probably the gypsy moth infestation that happened several years ago. It was now, between falling trees into the roadways and things like that during storms. Certainly we're seeing fires, as I said, burn up into these trees, hidden pockets of fire up into these trees that we really didn't see before. So, to that effect, a public service announcement to property owners, or encouraging the town with town-owned property to do what we can to try and remove some of those trees, limit those risks to not only to our firefighters, but to the public in general, and things of that nature. And that, that's, another thing that comes to my mind when we talk about drought is, as we know, Westport, well, you may or may not know, Westport only has hydrants in about 20% of the town, the northwest portion of town, typically around White's Restaurant. We are seeing some added hydrants now on Route 6 and up around Gifford Road, which will certainly be helpful. But in the south end of town, there are none. And we have some cisterns around town now in the south end, 10,000 gallon tanks in the ground. Any new development with 3 houses or more has to have at least one cistern put in for every 800 feet, every so many houses. So that's helpful. A lot of the ponds that we used to pull water from, I've noticed as property owners change, as things change hands, maybe as we rely on different sources of water. Adamsville Pond, we have a dry hydrant there now. If you go down heading by I think it's called the Daily Grind, you'll see that pipe, red and white pipe coming up out of the pond. That's a dry hydrant. That's actually for our access. We can pull water out of the pond. So primarily we'll go to those areas now. The days of us kind of pulling up to a pond and pulling water from it, sort of gone by the wayside. But at the same time, a lot of those ponds are dried up a majority of the year, especially during the drought conditions. And access to them, especially when they're privately owned, I've noticed a lot of these areas have become overgrown. Westport Marine on Main Road, I'm sorry, we used to pull water from there all the time back when I first got on in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And you drive by there now, you can't even tell there's a pond there anymore. So, that's certainly a concern of ours is obviously water puts out fire, and the lack of it, the lack of hydrants in the south end, the lack of areas for us to pull water from is always of a concern. We certainly changed our tactics and strategy. We call for tankers often. We call for tankers quickly now and get them on the road. We can always cancel them. Those are usually coming from outside of our community. So we have a lot of resources, a lot of mutual aid agreements, and very, very good working relationships with our surrounding fire departments to help us in these situations. But yeah, the risk is real. Hopefully we hope we'll never see what we saw around California on this area. I think can it happen? Sure, it can happen. I don't know if it would be as grave as we saw over there. Again, just the topography alone with the hillsides and the homes built on the hillsides and piled on top of each other. That makes a lot of, and the sustained winds makes it a challenge. But we have our challenges here in Westport as well, as I mentioned. And that's sort of wraps my spiel up. You guys.
So Chief, first of all, thank you for attending and and putting thought in and sharing the wisdom born of experience with us. You were on the mailing list for tonight's meeting, and there were a whole bunch of attachments, and one of them was the outline of our draft report that Jeff Canton has been assembling from all of our task forces. And it's right now it's about 18 pages, but this is still kind of halfway between an outline and a report to the select board. And it's assembling work of all of our committees in agriculture, public health, water, and so on. And when we start to get this more fully developed, there's going to be an extensive public outreach with community meetings, and anywhere we can find 5 people gathered together, could be in somebody's kitchen, we're going to be talking about this. And so just the 15 minutes you just took with risk assessment and what you can do about it, if that ends up in this report, it ends up in community outreach and public education. And as you said, recommendations of things the town can do, and recommendations that people can do, like don't pile mulch up against vinyl siding, or don't park, on brush. Pretty basic stuff, but it makes a difference between whether someone loses their home or not. And believe me, I've had my house burned to a total loss. You don't want to lose your home. You don't want to lose your home. So I really thank you, and want you to consider having a team take just like the 15 minutes that you just said and saying, can we take the opportunity of what this report is going to turn into in terms of a document where the immediate charge is it's a report to the select board, but it's also going to get distributed in any way we can think of to all the people, businesses, organizations in Westport with recommendations. And I'd love to see what you just said in 15 minutes incorporated in this. So we'd love to be in touch with you, or whoever you say we should be in touch with, to make sure what you just said is part of that, because I found that really helpful, useful assessments and recommendations, Chief. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, we'll definitely continue to work on the documentation, and I'll also reach out to DCR for some of their advice and what they see out in the field, as well as the Department of Fire Services. I'm sure they would have a lot of data that I may not have here that would, just bring some light to the risk.
Thank you. Now,
All
I note that we've had a few other people join, Bob Daler, and we're now up to, I think, 12 people, which is a quorum. And before anything else happens on the agenda, there is approval of 3 sets of minutes: July 18th, September 19th, both of which we have discussed in the past, and no one found any errors there, and December 5th, which was our last meeting, which was distributed. I read those minutes. I thought they were excellent. I would love to have a motion to approve all of those minutes.
So moved.
Jim Whiten has made a motion to approve the 3 sets of minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second, Jake McGuigan, I saw, I mean, half the people seconded, but I
John.
saw Jake first. Jake second.
John,
Any discussion?
John, we have to, just so you know, we have to call roll on,
Minutes? We have to call a roll on minutes?
for online votes. Yeah, we have to call roll.
Oh, all right. Michael, would you call a roll?
Yeah, Sean Leach. Sean
You're
Leach,
gonna
you're
have to-
muted.
Yeah, you're going to have to unmute yourself to call a roll.
All right, well,
And Sean, all right, here he is. John?
Aye.
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 Bob Daler,
Gotta unmute, Bob. This is the only vote we're taking, so, okay.
thank you. Constance Key,
Aye.
Jake McGuigan,
Aye.
Jim Whiten,
Aye.
John Bullard,
Aye.
Mark Rasmussen,
Aye.
Michael Yogman,
Aye.
Bill Weinberg,
Aye.
Shauna Tees,
Aye.
Wendy Nicholas.
Aye.
Did I get everyone? I guess so. Thanks.
Phil Weinberg's here.
He said aye.
I am, John.
Okay, you got everyone? Okay. Hey, we did that. Fantastic. I think that's the only vote we need to take. Thank you. And I note Constance put in a compliment in the chat. Thank you, Dan, very much for that report. It was really good, and I appreciate your being willing to add. Now, as I said, that
You're welcome.
Jeff has, and we have distributed his update on how to take all of the subcommittee reports and turn them into a single report from all of the committee that would go to the select board and also be used as something we can then begin a public engagement. And what I like about it is I gave him a suggested outline and he didn't pay any attention to my suggestion at all. And I thought that's evidence of a guy who's really thinking. Ignore your chair. And I thought it was much smarter than my idea. And but this is very different than what we looked at, I think, at our last meeting. And so I'm sorry, this is a busy time for Jeff in his business. He can't be here to go through this. So what I urge you to do is take a look at it. For example, the last page has all these greens and reds and yellows. I don't know what really this means in terms of how far along each of the committees are. So I think we're going to need to spend some time with Jeff on explaining how this works. But read it, think about, does it capture how you envision this report should be? And again, it's an outline. You all have done more work than what is in here. This is conceptual in some ways. And so think about how the work you have done and the work you still plan to do fits into this. And then at the next meeting on May 21st, 28th, May 28th, just testing you. We'll go over this more with Jeff. Any questions on this? I don't see any hands up, so I'm going to assume you're going to look at this and then we'll have this on the agenda. Michael and Dia, will you note down, this is a fuller discussion for next week. And let's pray to goodness that Jeff can make the 28th. All right. Now, next, I reached out to Dean Michael Goodman at UMass Dartmouth and said, Michael, UMass Dartmouth is an incredible resource in our area, happens to be located on Old Westport Road. Any way that your facility, with all its incredible faculty, all its amazing students, would want to get engaged with the Climate Resilience Committee. And he said, absolutely. And he set up first one meeting, then another meeting, then another meeting. And we have with us Chad McGuire, and I don't see Nefelli here with us. So Chad, we met with Nefelli Bompoti and with Gavin Fay and with John Quinn from the law school. And to see, there's so many incredible advantages of the resource that is UMass Dartmouth. One of them is that climate resilience, as we all know, has many, many different dimensions. Well, guess what? So does UMass Dartmouth, you know, economics, marine science, socioeconomics, you name it. And not to mention data aggregation, graphic design. They do everything. And so Dia, Michael, Jeff, and I had several meetings with them, and they've got a tremendous grant to help work with communities. And Westport still, with the exception of the city of New Bedford, is the only town working on the issue of resilience. And so we told them what we're doing. They told us what they're doing. And we're starting to look at, hey, how can we work together? And so they looked at the outline that Jeff has put together that kind of summarizes our work. And they said, well, here's how we might help. And with that, I think, let me ask, first of all, Michael Burris, you want to add anything to my introduction before I ask Chad to give the perspective of the university?
Sure. So you covered some of the background of it. What we have done is provided UMD with a potential list of tasks to collaborate on. And that was shared prior to this meeting. And so I think tentatively UMD's agreed to help support some of support the CRC in drafting a full climate resilience report. So the way we've talked about that working is that UMD would start this process by reviewing the existing subcommittee reports that everyone has drafted, as well as the draft report outline that Jeff has prepared. And then they would take that and identify gaps, additional data, analyses, things like that, that could enhance our existing content. And so then I guess the way this has kind of been conceptualized is that the CRC would regularly meet with UMD to work on that project plan and the timeline, and then offer suggestions or wish list items to UMD. Again, this is kind of at a conceptual level right now. It's not like we have an MOU in place or anything with UMD, but we're really interested in pursuing this because I think it will greatly expand the CRC's capacity to get this document fully fledged and into a nice packaged, professional looking document that we can publish.
Great. Thanks, Michael. So let me introduce Chad McGuire, and Chad, you want to introduce yourself and tell people how you see this going? We're still at the very early stages, and when you're done, I want to ask people for their comments and see how many people want to be engaged in this partnership with us.
Sure. Thanks, John. And thanks, Michael. So I think my name's Chad McGuire. Lifelong resident, born and raised, born in New Bedford, raised in Dartmouth. I actually was a million years ago the Adopt a Watershed coordinator for Westport River Watershed Alliance for about a year before I left for San Diego to go to law school. But I'm back here. I've been here for a while. I'm a professor of public policy at UMass Dartmouth. Excuse me, I've had some sort of a cold there that won't go away. I don't know if anybody else has had this fun thing, but so excuse my voice as it flails. But so so I work at the university. I work on I'm an environmental science background, environmental law. I work mostly in the policy field. I do a lot of coastal resiliency. Nefeli is another person that was mentioned. She's an environmental engineer. She's come here recently from the University of Connecticut. She does a lot of sort of help with communities and developing sort of plans when communities have hazardous substances. This is her past, working with EPA grants mostly, developing, redeveloping hazardous substance areas, and working mostly in low-income communities, mostly in Connecticut. That's her past history, but now she's in Massachusetts and also New Hampshire, so on and so forth, New England area. And we also have Gavin Fay. So just a quick background, we do a lot of work. We have all of the normal things we need to do, all of the stuff that the normal, we're just individual professors. We don't have a center or something like that. Nefeli has her lab, Gavin has her lab. I do my work. It's mostly, I do like in Miami and other areas of the country, but I've done work here. I actually was on the Stewardship Council, DCR, for about 8 years. So I know the local stuff pretty well here in Massachusetts. But we all do our work and the things that we do. We were given this opportunity with a large grant. The grant's not for us. The grant has been dispersed in 1,000 different ways for the university, but there was a large grant money funded by the legislature to develop the marine economy, the blue economy here in Massachusetts. And a lot of that money's been spent on a lot of different things, or it's being spent on a lot of different things in that vein. Some money was given to Nefeli, submitted a proposal. I submitted a separate proposal. Gavin submitted a separate proposal for different things that we do. Our proposals were kind of combined. We all do different things, and were put together as a sort of proposal by Mike Goodman in the provost's office. And we were given some money. And our proposal now is this idea of this sort of like technical assistance to communities. Generally speaking, for blue economy initiatives, but we all deal with coastal. So Gavin's coastal resiliency from SMAS, I'm coastal resiliency from the policy side, and Nefeli is working with communities on resiliency planning in general. Again, mostly in certain contexts that are a little bit different. But so that we're trying to figure out. So really, we were given money to plan, to figure out how we could build out the expertise we have at the university and build it into something that could be this sort of thing that was available to communities. So, Westport was already happening. This is something John contacted Mike. We're at the very early stages of our trying to figure out what it is, how we can connect and do these things. But one of the things that Nefeli pointed out is these types of reports are something that she does regularly in the type of work that she does for the communities. It's not exactly the same, but she does these kinds of reports. It's not exactly what I do. I do mostly the sort of planning, decision-making architecture, help people with how they make decisions. I try to present some of that. I sent some to John and to that idea of like, what's a good way to do this in a way that might lead to other benefits down the road, right? So planning it out, like how do we want to do this and how can this help us in the future? Like not just today, but help us in other ways. How can it, kill two birds with one stone? Terrible saying, but the idea is, doing multiple things with one thing. So we're here. I think Nefeli and I mostly, because Gavin is busy right now doing a few other things, but he might come in later with some sort of implementation help. The idea that after a report. But I think that what Michael said is the thing that's most right. There is a wish list of things. There are more things than we can handle. We're not the university. And there are other resources at our university And we might be able to get those resources associated together, and some of them might be able to be deployed in this way. But just so you understand, as everybody understands, nobody's just sitting around at the university waiting for something to do. Everybody's busy doing a bunch of things. So we're trying to figure out how we can make this thing maybe as an example of something we could do and helping you do what you're trying to do. It's not an easy thing because we didn't start at the beginning. You guys have been doing this for years. So the kind of help that I could give would have been at the planning stage, the best help, or it's more at the, how do we now use this effectively? That's the kind of things that I do. There's things that I can do now. I think I can help in terms of drafting the report, just basically what Michael pointed out, this idea of, looking through, I've looked through the chapters. We have a meeting tomorrow with Jeff, Nepheli and I, so we're going to talk with Jeff a little bit more about that. I just saw your chapters and the details. And of course, there's this outline. I don't think the outline has a lot of the chapter material in it, but there's that general sort of generic outline of a report. It's just, one of the things that's interesting to me is usually there's this sort of unifying sort of, and I think you do have, generally speaking, a framework, but maybe it was a little wider at first, but there's a unifying, I think we can help in a number of ways. It's just a matter of the things that we can do is something that you want, to help with. It's something that would be useful to you. But there are definitely things that we can do at the very least, like at the end with, if you need help with preparing the report, making the report look really nice, look like a professional, that kind of thing, with nice pictures and nice graphs and some information. But again, we'll be talking with Jeff a little bit more about that tomorrow. And I think there should be an ongoing process, as much as there can be, with time on both sides, to try to sort of refine that. But so think of it as a very organic thing, like a first date. Like, we really don't know, we're trying to figure it out, but hey, we both like these things, and maybe we could be helpful to each other. Mostly we could be helpful to you, I think, the university, in that way. And then it could be just helping you draft the report, something that you can then use and parlay. I think you already have SERPID. I think, Mike, in a previous email, you identified you already got partners with the Watershed Alliance, with SERPID, with moving forward maybe with some grants and some community outreach in that way. And that's great. And that's perfect. The baton is passed on. The relay continues, you move on, and that's great. But we're always there, maybe as a resource, as a potential resource. But it's a matter of sort of matching. And because we weren't here, just so you understand, because we weren't here at the very beginning when you first started, it's hard to sort of know how to best help at this stage based on what resources we might have, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of sort of like unknowns at this moment, at least from my end and from our end. But I think Nepheli is adamant about the idea of at least helping in the drafting, which I think is something we can definitely handle, and basically what Michael outlined. But I think we can do more too. I just don't know.
Thanks, Chad, very much. Any questions of Chad or Michael or me on this beginning partnership? Constance, you've got your hand raised.
Yes. Well, Michael Burris was nice enough to send me, I'm trying to find it now, to send me a sort of a proposal, I guess, that collaboration topics that I guess that UMass Dartmouth had given, suggested. And I just want to say that Chad, I mean, I'm not sure. The number 3. I don't know if anybody got this except for me to look at, it was helpful because it gave me a little heads up before the meeting. I'm not sure who else has read it, but the item number 3 makes me a little bit nervous, and I just want to let Chad know that in item number 3, in case you haven't read it, is assist in developing a cross-cutting chapter presenting best available, I'm having a hard time reading it, climate change indicators and projections for Westport to be referenced throughout the report. I think that there has been for a long time a little uneasiness and a little disagreement within the committee in terms of I think a few of us, at least me, I'll just speak for myself, doesn't want to see this climate resiliency report turn into yet another climate change sort of I'm just going to say it outright, sort of fear mongering, using the most extreme data, and this is all going to happen to you if you don't do this and that. So I'm just hoping that that piece of it will be something that is based on numbers that make sense, and also doesn't just sort of take over the report.
Constance, let me reply to that, because we talked about that exactly in one of our first meetings. And Jeff has been very strong about this as well, which is that we want to put the emphasis on resilience, not on climate change. Let me give an example. And I think Bob Daler, who's with us as well and is head of the infrastructure team, feels this way, and I think a lot of people do, that it's much more important to talk about things as an example. If we know sea level is going to rise, and therefore low-lying roads that are evacuation routes should be elevated or strengthened, then that's an issue of resilience, that when you have an opportunity or you have funding to strengthen or elevate low-lying roads that are evacuation routes, that makes a community more resilient. Now, that's putting the emphasis on resilience. Saying that sea level is going to rise X feet by 2025 or 2050, that's putting the emphasis on climate change, or, getting into arguments about projections. And that's when you get into arguments over whose projection should you use. And I think it's better for this group to focus the discussion on things that make us resilient, and to just keep that example. Elevating low-lying roads that are evacuation routes just makes sense, because sea level is going to rise somewhat somewhere, and it's more, it doesn't really matter whether it's in 25 years or 50 years. Elevating low-lying evacuation routes makes sense. When you have the resources, you should do it, rather than arguing whether it's going to rise a foot in 25 years or 50 years. Does that make sense to you, Constance?
Yeah, and I appreciate your elaborating on that. It was very interesting at the Barrier Beach meeting last night, where they were talking about the possibility of raising East Beach Road. And a couple of people were talking, I think one woman from the state and somebody else from, I guess it's the Woods Hole group, were talking about that wasn't always a very good idea. It seemed like it would be, but that often that the front piece of that would that anything that was along like a body of water, like the ocean, that it might actually make the, what do I want to call it, the washout or the worse, that it might actually have exactly the opposite effect that you think it's going to have with a elevated road. So I mean, all that can be talked about, but I found that fascinating, because it seemed like such a well, yeah, you elevate the road and that helps keep it from getting flooded, but I don't know. So there's a lot to be learned here, and that's why I'm kind of fascinated with the Barrier Beach Committee. I think it'll be a very interesting.
Well, my point is, I think we want to put the emphasis on resilient. What makes a community resilient, as opposed to
Yes.
projections. So
Yes, I hope so. Thank you.
okay. Any other?
I put
Any
this
other-
in the chat, but I just wanted to say that the list was developed by Jeff Canton. So I think we have an understanding with UMD that they want to help us with the priorities that we're setting through the CRC, and not vice versa. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that came from the CRC via the Outreach and Engagement Subcommittee.
Jim
Great.
Whiten has his hand up. Jim.
Yeah, I think that Jeff's draft is really going in the right direction. And I think most of the things are focused, as you say, John, on resilience and not necessarily just on climate resilience. And I've just put into the chat a link to what Serpent has been doing for a regional resilience plan. It's very interesting to read. It takes a little different tact than ours, but it may be informative. So I hope everybody can see that.
Well, I'm glad you point that out because as Chad said, we've got, I think this partnership will be, us. And I think one of the things that attracts UMD to Westport is that UMass Dartmouth has, I wouldn't call it a mandate, but an interest in working with communities and communities here as opposed to Connecticut. And that Westport, while it would have been nice for us to start this discussion a few years ago, well, we're starting it now. And that if we figure this out, a resilience, and as Chad mentioned and Michael mentioned, Serped is involved too. And as I joke, Jim Whiten has been Westport's person on Serped since before there was Serped. So if we produce a report, I think with the expertise available with professors like Nefelli and Chad and Gavin and other people they can draw on as needed, it's going to be a lot better report than if it's just us. And it's going to therefore provide better service to the people of Westport. But once it's done, it's also going to be, I guarantee it, copied by Dartmouth, Tiverton, you name it. And it's going to be a service to the region. And Serped is going to help distribute it. UMass Dartmouth is going to help, and it will spread. I was going to say it'll spread like wildfire, but I don't know if the chief is still with us here. I won't use that analogy.
So I want to explain the Serped piece a little bit. So we've been talking with Serped about getting their assistance with helping with community outreach and engagement in a similar way that we're doing with the MVP 2.0 program, but on a much larger scale and over a longer time frame. So we're looking at applying for a 2-year grant through the MVP action grant, and I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to that agenda item. I don't want to derail this conversation, but Serped is the value in partnering with them is that they're embedded in the community, and there's a little bit of a mutually beneficial relationship with them partnering with us on this kind of as a pilot for themselves, because then they can take our model to other communities in the region. And Serped is also going to be they're a little bit more affordable than using a typical private consultant, so that helps give us a little bit more spread for each dollar that we're spending. And yeah, I think as town staff, I think you all know that we're all spread pretty thin, and so if we can tap into that capacity and get Serped out in the community to assist with the community engagement, that again, I mean, we'll definitely be trying to bring in residents. Right now I'm working on trying to bring in students from Westport schools. There are a number of students who are going to send me letters of interest to participate in this initiative later on next year. So we really want to get the community involved as much as possible, but Serped will be there to be that interface to help get events coordinated and to staff those events and things like that.
So if I
I
could
know-
just add, John, if
Yeah,
I
go-
could just add a little bit about the link that I just sent around, and Michael's going to send it again after the meeting, is they are looking for feedback on their plan as well. And I think in no small part, they started this after we started our committee, and we are still, I think, the only municipality within the Serpent region of 27 towns and cities that are doing this. So,
Thank you, Jim. One sec, Phil. Kim put in the chat that she was glad to see UMD involved. I just want to say, based on Kim's comment, that Kim from the Watershed Alliance has been working very hard and effectively to involve the Westport schools. And the issue of resilience is one where the ultimate constituency is future generations. And so one challenge, I think, Chad, that I would lay out for you, and I've mentioned this before, is if there are ways that, as Kim is involving the Westport schools, for you and Nepheli and Gavin, if you can find ways to involve students as well at UMD, that would be exciting. Phil Weinberg has his hand raised.
I just want to circle back, on the point that Constance was raised. And one of the things that I think mitigates against the concerns about what she characterized as fear-mongering is that the charter, which I think was also part of the package of the committee, was really to focus on where we'll be in 2050. And if you look at the different models of climate change and where they begin to diverge, it's in the out years. In the next, about 25 years now, all those models are actually quite close together. And for me, when I wrote the health report with the committee, it was really important to look at the quantitative projections which the state had developed in its two plans in order to understand what the magnitude of the risk was. That is, how many extreme heat days are we going to have in 2050, to understand the magnitude of the problem. And so, as much as I agree with you that we really do have to focus on resilience activities and what we can do, I think being able to go through the process of risk analysis and weighting, it is really important to come up with the quantitative data and educate people that, well, you may not see that as a problem around, but over the next 20 years, it could look like this. And
That's a great point, Phil. Thank you. Good point. Other questions? If not, I want to move on. We're after 6 o'clock. Okay, Michael, you have some grant funding update. I will say again, as I've said before, Michael and his team are wizards at getting money coming into the town of Westport like no one's ever seen. Michael, you're on.
It's a group effort. I mean, we have a lot of great community partners that we work with on different stuff like Buzzards Bay Coalition and the Watershed Alliance. So, yeah, it's not just us. We all work as a team here. So, anyway, just an update on our Barrier Beach planning grants. These are it's a coastal zone management grant and a municipal vulnerability planning grant that we're now implementing. As Constance had said earlier, we had a really good meeting yesterday with the Barrier Beach Planning Committee. We just kicked that off with Wood's whole group, and they're going to be working on developing the existing kind of baseline conditions plans for the barrier beach management plans that we'll be developing. And they've started that through recently through surveying. They're doing some sediment analysis, and they're taking all of the many studies that have been done in these areas at Atlantic Avenue, Beach Avenue, and East Beach, and synthesizing all of that to inform the baseline conditions of the plan. So we're going to have an extensive public engagement process for this. It's a really quick timeline. Unfortunately, we have to be done with the CZM grant in July, and then the MVP grant will extend, or excuse me, the CZM grant through June, and then the MVP grant will be extended a little bit through July. Our first public engagement for this is going to be, it's tentatively scheduled for March 20th at 6 p.m. at the Westport Library. Just stay tuned for that, because like I said, we're not quite sure if it's going to be, there's some talk yesterday about it being in a virtual format, so that might change, but I think we're pretty solid on March 20th, but we'll put out a notice on the town's website for that. And so then at the end of this process, Constance, to answer your question, it's based on when our contracts with the state are, for the grant contracts are up. That's why it's such a quick turnaround, and they have made it very clear that under no circumstance are our grantor or grantee is going to be able to extend those deadlines. So yeah, I mean, it's just, unfortunately, it's just what we have to work with. So Woods Hole is going to be preparing the beach management plans that are going to be a draft. They're not going to quite go through the whole permitting phase with DEP, just due to these timelines. But these plans will include an alternatives analyses. They're going to try to balance various interests at the beaches with techniques that can slow erosion. And they will incorporate cost estimates for these types of projects. We're going to really emphasize taking into consideration the town's constrained financial capacity to make large scale investments. And then after all of this is taken together, the town would then need to look for funding sources, which will be identified in the plan, to advance some of those projects that will be recommended, and to then take the beach management plans to full permitting. So that's a just quick overview of what's going on with that. All right, so I'll move on to the next grant, which is the Bay Coast Bank Community Assistance Grant. I guess this is actually a fund that Bay Coast has to support different initiatives in the region. And Jeff and I had applied to support the development of the CRC's report, and we were awarded a $7,500 grant a couple months ago. This grant is unconditional, so we can really use it for anything. The only request from them is that whatever deliverables and events that we put out, we just acknowledge their support of the project. And this grant is, it's small, but it's actually going to be pretty impactful for the next grant that I want to talk about, because we can use the $7,500 for match on the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant. And this is a grant that we are currently working on applying for right now. It is due on April 4th. We will be submitting for a 2-year outreach and engagement campaign focused on community resilience and informing the community. The engagement will be in service of informing the development of the community, or excuse me, the climate resilience plan. We had submitted an EOI for this a couple of months ago, and Courtney Roca, who is also on this committee and is our MVP regional rep, thought that it would be highly competitive, especially given some of the support that we've received from the Westport River Watershed Alliance, the interest from the Westport schools and having students participate in this project, and as well as the potential collaboration with UMD. So we'll be applying for this in the coming month. fortunately, and this year they've actually waived the for rural and small towns the requirement that you provide match. So the $7,500 in match that we have that in place already, I think is going to give us an extra bump in the review process to show that, yes, we have resources committed to this. We also have institutional support from places like UMD. We could also, with UMD, calculate that as in kind to further bolster our application. So I think we have a pretty strong chance of getting this grant as long as we have a strong application itself. So as for a timeline for this, as I said, the applications are due in early April, on April 4th. The program is expecting to announce awards in probably mid-June, late June, and then the project would have to start in September. And then at which point we would embark on the community engagement with the SERPED is who we're intending on working with as I had discussed earlier.
Do you need a motion to endorse that application?
If the committee would feel inclined to endorse it, that would be great, because then we could get a little support
I
letter
think
together.
we should do that. Is there a motion to endorse that application? Bob Dale, do you move
Yes,
that?
I do. I move that we endorse the application.
Is there a second?
We-
Shauna seconds. Now, do you have to do a roll call again?
We do have to call roll, and we also don't have a quorum right now.
You sure we don't have a quorum yet?
We have 16 people, and a couple of folks aren't on the committee. So yeah, we don't have a quorum to take a vote.
I'm sorry. I could you please tell me again? I must have missed it. What is it that what project are we voting on? What is this project?
The Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant that Michael just described. We're endorsing that application.
But it seems like we're just gonna have to have consensus rather than a vote if we don't have quorum.
Don't we have 10 people?
So are we applying for money to help produce this report? I'm sorry to be so dense. I'm just like,
We have 10 people. We
Yeah,
have
that-
10
We have 10.
people here. We
Is-
have a quorum.
Oh,
There are
do you?
10
Okay.
people.
Okay,
I
great.
do not hear a challenge to a quorum.
Sorry.
Call a roll.
Yeah.
So wait,
Call a
so
roll.
Constance had a question though. Constance, this is Michael, the grant application he's creating. He can say that our committee endorsed it.
And this grant is to so as a part of any community planning document, we want to make sure that we're getting out in the community and talking to people and making sure that we're getting a finger on the pulse of where the community's resilience priorities are and getting them involved with developing solutions. And so the purpose of this grant is to solely be used for funding that public engagement to inform the development of the resilience priorities and solutions in the climate resilience report.
Thank you. Any other questions? It's been moved and seconded. We have a quorum. Would you call a roll?
Sure. Bob Daler,
Aye.
Constance Gee,
sure.
Jake McGuigan,
Aye.
Jim Whiten,
Aye.
John Bullard,
Aye.
Michael Yogman,
Aye.
Phil Weinberg,
Aye.
Sean Leach,
Aye.
Shauna Tees,
Hi.
Wendy Nicholas.
Aye.
And that's it. So the motion carries.
Okay. That is the end of the agenda. Anything else anyone wants to bring up? Our next meeting date is Wednesday, May 28th, and it will be in person. And Michael will find a site for us to meet that holds 20 people or so.
John,
Yes,
John, it's Wendy. I just wanted to let you know, I texted Jeff Canton to make sure that he could attend. That seemed to be kind of critical. He says, yes, he's available.
thank you, Wendy, for thinking.
Brain's working.
The brain's working. Very good. All right. If there's no other business, tomorrow night, 7:00, the Westport High School basketball team plays at home. May be an opportunity for you all or us all to see the greatest basketball player in the history of Westport. Just some information there. Very resilient. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I moved.
Second, no roll call, I don't think. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.